Chapter 3, 1971. The Ganggulis have moved to a university town outside Boston. As far as they know, they are the only Bengali residents. The town has a historic district, a brief strip ends. There is a white-steepled congregational church, a stone courthouse with an adjoining jail, a coupled public library, a wooden well from which Paul Revere is rumored to have drunk. In winter, tapers burn in the windows of homes after dark. Ashok has been hired as an assistant professor of electrical engineering at the university. In exchange for teaching 5 classes, he earns $16,000 a year. He is given his own office with his name etched onto a strip of black plastic by the door. He shares, along with other members of his department, the services of an elderly secretary named Mrs. Jones, who often puts a plate of homemade banana bread by the coffee percolator in the staff room. The job is everything Ashok had ever dreamed of. He has always hoped to teach in a university rather than work for a corporation. What a thrill, he thinks, to stand lecturing before a room full of American students. What a sense of accomplishment it gives him to see his name printed under faculty in the university directory. What joy each time Mrs. Jones says to him, "Professor Ganguly, your wife is on the phone." For Ashima, migrating to the suburbs feels more drastic, more distressing than the move from Calcutta to Cambridge has been. She wishes Ashok had accepted the position at Northeastern so that they could have stayed in the city. She is stunned that in this town there are no sidewalks to speak of, no streetlights, no public transportation, no stores for miles at a time. She has no interest in learning how to drive the new Toyota Corolla that is now necessary for them to own. Though no longer pregnant, she continues at times to mix Rice Krispies and peanuts and onions into a bowl. After 2 years in an overheated university-subsidized apartment, Ashima and Ashok are ready to purchase a home. In the evening after dinner, they set out in their car. The walls of the new house are painted, the driveway sealed with pitch, the shingles and sun deck weatherproofed and stained. Ashok takes photographs of every room, Gogol standing somewhere in the frame, to send to relatives in India. There are pictures of Gogol opening up the refrigerator, pretending to talk on the phone. He is sturdily built child, with full cheeks but already pensive features. When he poses for the camera, he has to be coaxed into a smile. The house is 15 minutes from the nearest supermarket, 40 minutes from a mall. The address is 67 Pemberton Road. Their neighbors are the Johnsons, the Mertons, the Esperys, the Hills. There are 4 modest bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, 8-foot ceilings, and a 1-car garage. The August that Gogol turns 5, Ashima discovers she is pregnant again. In the mornings, she forces herself to eat a slice of toast, only because Ashok makes it for her and watches her. Because his mother tends to vomit the moment she finds herself in a moving car, she is unable to accompany her husband to take Gogol in September of 1973 to his first day of kindergarten at the town's public elementary school. By the time Gogol starts, it is already the second week of the school year. But for the past week, Gogol has been in bed, just like his mother, listless, without appetite, claiming to have stomachache, even vomiting one day into his mother's pink wastepaper basket. He doesn't want to go to kindergarten. He doesn't want to hear the new clothes his mother has bought him from Sears, hanging on a knob of the dresser, or carry his Charlie Brown lunchbox, or board the yellow school bus that stops at the end of Pemberton Road. The school, unlike the nursery school, is several miles from the house, several miles from the university. On numerous occasions, he's been driven to see the new building, a long brick structure with a perfectly flat roof and a flag that flaps at the top of the tall white pole planted on the lawn. Gogol doesn't want to go to kindergarten. His parents have told him that at school, instead of being called Gogol, he will be called by a new name, a good name, which his parents have finally decided on, just in time for him to begin his formal education. The name, Nikhil, is artfully connected to the old. Not only is it the perfect, respectable Bengali good name, meaning he who is entire, encompassing all, but it also bears a satisfying resemblance to Nikolai, the first name of the Russian Gogol. At school, Ashok and Gogol are greeted by the secretary, Mrs. McNabb, who asks Ashok to fill out a registration form. "Welcome to elementary school, Nikhil. I am your principal, Mrs. Lapidus." Gogol looks down at his sneakers. The way the principal pronounces his new name is different from the way his parents say it, in the second part of it longer, sounding like heel. She bends down so that her face is level with his and extends a hand to his shoulder. Can you tell me how old you are, Nikhil? When the question is repeated and there is still no response, Mrs. Lapidus asks, Mr. Ganguly, does Nikhil follow English? Of course he follows, Ashok says. My son is perfectly bilingual. In order to prove that Gogol knows English, Ashok does something he has never done before and addresses his son in careful, accented English. Go on, Gogol, he says, patting him on the head. Tell Mrs. Lapidus how old you are. What was that? Mrs. Lapidus says. I beg your pardon, madam? That sound you called him, something with a G. Oh, that is what we call him at home only, but his name should be he nods his head firmly, Nikhil. Mrs. Lapidus frowns. I'm afraid I don't understand. Good name? Yes. When they are alone, Mrs. Lapidus asks, Are you happy to be entering elementary school, Gogol? My parents want me to have another name in school. And what about you, Gogol? Do you want to be called by another name? After a pause, he shakes his head. Is that a no? He nods. Yes. Then it is settled. Can you write your name on this piece of paper? In May, his sister is born. 2 days later, coming back from school, Gogol finds his mother at home again, wearing a bathrobe instead of a sari, and sees his sister awake for the first time. She is dressed in pink pajamas that conceal her hands and feet, with a pink bonnet tied around her moon-shaped face. His father is home too. His parents sit Gogol on the living room sofa and place Sonali in his lap, telling him to hold her against his chest, a hand cupped under her head, and his father takes pictures with a new Nikon 35mm camera. The shutter advances softly, repeatedly. The room is bathed in a rich afternoon light. Hi, Sonali, Gogol says, sitting stiffly, looking down at her face and then up at the lens. Though Sonali is the name on her birth certificate, the name she will carry officially through life, at home they begin to call her Sonu, then Sona, and finally Sonia. They learn to roast turkeys, albeit rubbed with garlic and cumin and cayenne, at Thanksgiving, to nail a wreath to their door in December, to wrap woolen scarves around snowmen, to color boiled eggs violet and pink at Easter and hide them around the house. For the sake of Gogol and Sonia, they celebrate, with progressively increasing fanfare, the birth of Christ, an event the children look forward to far more than the worship of Durga and Saraswati. During pujos scheduled for convenience on 2 Saturdays a year, Gogol and Sonia are dragged off to a high school or a Knights of Columbus hall overtaken by Bengalis, where they are required to throw marigold petals at a cardboard effigy of a goddess and eat bland vegetarian food. It can't compare to Christmas, when they hang stockings on the fireplace mantel. The final stop on the field trip, and set out milk and cases for Santa Claus and receive heaps of presents and stay home from school. There are other ways in which Ashok and Ashima give in. Though Ashima continues to wear nothing but saris and sandals from Bata, Ashok, accustomed to wearing tailor-made pants and shirts all of his life, learns to buy ready-made. He trades a fountain pen for ballpoint, Wilkinson blades, and his bristled shaving brush for Bic razors bought to a six-pack. Though he is now a tenured full professor, he stops wearing jackets and ties to the university. Given that there is a clock everywhere he turns, at the side of his bed, over the stove, where he prepares tea, in the car he drives to work, on the wall opposite his desk, he stops wearing a wristwatch, resigning his Fairvluba to the depths of his sock drawer. In the supermarket, they let Gogol fill the cart with items that he and Sonia, but not they, consume. Individually wrapped slices of cheese, mayonnaise, tuna fish, hot dogs. For Gogol's lunches, they stand at the deli to buy cold cuts, and in the mornings, Ashima makes sandwiches with bologna and roast beef. At his insistence, she stops and makes an American dinner once a week as a treat, shake-and-baked chicken or hamburger helper prepared with ground lamb. Still, they do what they can. They make a point of driving into Cambridge with the children when the Apu trilogy plays in the Orson Wells, or where there is a Kakali dance performance at a sitar recital at Memorial Hall. When Gogol is in the 3rd grade, they send him to a Bengali language and culture lesson every other Saturday, held in the home of one of their friends. For when Ashima and Ashok close their eyes, it never fails to unsettle them that their children sound just like Americans, expertly conversing in a language that still at times confounds them, in accents they are accustomed not to trust. In Bengali class, Gogol is taught to read and write his ancestral alphabet, which begins at the back of his throat with an unaspirated K, and marches steadily across the roof of his mouth, ending with an elusive vowel that hovers outside his lips. As a young boy, Gogol doesn't mind his name. Then one day, the peculiarity of his name becomes apparent. He is 11 years old, in the 6th grade, on a school field trip of some historical intent. The final stop on the field trip is at a poet's house, in a graveyard where the writer lies buried. To Gogol's surprise, they are told not to draw the gravestones, but to rub their surfaces. A teacher crouches down, one hand holding the newsprint in place, and shows them how. The children begin to scamper between rows of the dead, over leaves, looking for their names. A handful triumphant when they are able to claim a grave they are related to. Smith, they holler. Collins. Wood. Gogol is old enough to know that there is no Ganguly here. He is old enough to know that he himself will be burned, not buried, and that his body will occupy no plot of earth, that no stone in this country will bear his name beyond life. In Calcutta, from taxis and from the roof of his grandparents' house, he has seen the dead bodies of strangers carried on people's shoulders through streets, decked with flowers and wrapped in sheets. At home, his mother is horrified. What type of field trip was this? It was enough that they applied lipstick to their corpses and buried them in silk-lined boxes. Only in America, a phrase that she has begun to resort to often these days, only in America are children taken to cemeteries in the name of art. What's next, she demands to know, a trip to the morgue? In Calcutta, the burning ghats are the most forbidden of places, she tells Gogol, and though she tries her best not to, though she was not there both times it happens, she sees her parents' bodies swallowed by flames. Death is not a pastime, she says, her voice rising unsteadily, not a place to make paintings. She refuses to display the rubbings in the kitchen alongside his other creations, his charcoal drawings and his magazine collages, his pencil sketch of a Greek temple copied from an encyclopedia, his pastel image of the public library's facade, awarded first place in a contest sponsored by the library trustees. Never before has she rejected a piece of her son's art. The guilt she feels at Gogol's deflated expression is leavened by her common sense. How can she be expected to cook dinner for her family with the names of dead people on the walls? But Gogol is attached to them, for reasons he cannot explain or necessarily understand. These ancient Puritan spirits, these very first immigrants to America, these bearers of unspeakable, obsolete names, have spoken to him, so much so that in spite of his mother's disgust, he refuses to throw the rubbings away. He rolls them up, takes them upstairs, and puts them in a room, behind his chest of drawers, where he knows his mother will never bother to look, and where they will remain until rolled up, gathering dust for years to come.